Good morning. We are going to begin the Galilean ministry, and that is significant. We're going to be talking about the Galilean ministry of Jesus as we get going. I will remind you of what we looked at, I guess, the last 3 weeks, and that is the Gospel of John. Basically, we hunkered down and spent our time in John's Gospel, chapters 2, 3, and 4. And so what you see on the screen there is review. The first cleansing of the temple, Jesus turning water to wine, he interviews Nicodemus, and then he travels through Samaria and has a conversation with the Samaritan woman. That's right. And as we get into the Gospel of John chapter 5, just before that, though, we see Jesus arrive into Galilee. And so I've kind of highlighted that there. Jesus' arrival into Galilee. I want to not only look at the contents of the gospel throughout our study, but I want to help us visualize and understand the big picture of his ministry, how it all fits together. Tell me this, there were two events before Jesus began his ministry, not just the Galilean ministry, but his overall ministry. What were those two key events? They're all recorded in the four Gospels. What are they? First, the baptism, and then the temptation. Those two events are back to back in all four Gospels. Now, the first recorded miracle of Jesus in the Gospel of John, the first sign, as it's called, is water turned to wine. And we'll briefly look at the second one this morning. So I've got on the screen there the chart that is available in the book, Amazed by Jesus, Volume 1. And on this chart, we've got a section called the Ministry of John. Well, we're past the Ministry of John. And part of that ministry was baptizing Jesus in the Jordan River. And now, as we're moving on, you can see we have bypassed the early Judean ministry. Why do we call it the early Judean? Well, you can see it's going to be over here. You're going to have the later Galilean ministry, where Jesus goes back to Judea. What is the major city in Judea? Jerusalem, of course. How many times during Jesus' ministry does he go down to Jerusalem? I'm holding up four fingers. It's actually three. Apparently, one Passover, it was too dangerous for him to go into Jerusalem. And we'll look at that much, much later during the later Judean ministry. But there are four different Passovers recorded, and that's on the chart. I don't have the arrows on this right here. John's Gospel helpfully records for us the four Passovers during Jesus' ministry. If you were to just read Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you might get the impression that Jesus' ministry was about 2 years. Look at how the Galilean ministry is divided up on the chart. You have three parts: early Galilean, middle Galilean, later Galilean. Those are real powerful names, aren't they? And this is what it's been called for centuries now, as people have been studying the Gospels and trying to see all four Gospels together. And you remember that John's Gospel hardly records any events during Jesus' Galilean ministry. But if you add up the months, the time frame, and this is approximate, this is based on Gospel scholars who have analyzed these books and studied how long total is the Galilean ministry. If you count up the months there, can you see that? So the early is, well, I guess you can't, 6 months, and then 10 months, and then 6 months. So how long is that? How many months? 22. That is nearly 2 years, all dedicated to Jesus being in Galilee. Now, does that mean he never wandered down anywhere else? Or no, we'll see some of that. In fact, he's going to go into the Decapolis, into Gentile territory. He'll also go into Phoenicia and Zarephath. But mainly, he is in Galilee. Why Galilee? Why would Jesus spend so much time there? That's where he's from. That's a big factor. In looking at the presentation of the four Gospels and the Galilean ministry, what you see is a bit of a lopsided presentation. Over half of Matthew and over half of Mark focus on the Galilean ministry. In fact, Matthew 19. I'm going to look at Matthew 19, verse 1 with you. So now that we're not there yet in our study, but in Matthew 19, we have finished the Galilean ministry, and this is what chapter 19, verse 1 says. Now, when Jesus had finished these things, he went away from Galilee and entered the region of Judea beyond the Jordan. In Mark chapter 10, verse 1. It also talks about Jesus leaving Galilee. And he left there and went to the region of Judea beyond the Jordan. And crowds gathered to him again. And again, as was his custom, he taught them. So Jesus is constantly teaching, performing miracles throughout his ministry. If you go over to Luke 9, verse 63. Luke 9, verse 63. And this chart is in the book, by the way. You don't have to copy this down. I got the wrong citation there. Did I say 62? What am I looking at, Mark? I looked at this earlier, and I have verse 60. I'm saying verse 63 because I know it's here in Luke 9. Yeah, verse 51. I think that, I'm not sure what I did there, but it should say, I think, Luke 9, verse 50. And then verse 51, when the days drew near for him to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. And then what you have across the end of Luke 9, which there's not much left here, all the way through most of chapter 19, Jesus is making his way to Jerusalem. He has set his face to go to Jerusalem. And it is during this period, which is very unusual for Luke, it's unique to Luke. There are numerous miracles and teachings that we cherish that only Luke records, and it's in this section between Luke 9 and chapter 19. The Good Samaritan, the Pharisee, and the publican. There's just numerous events that take place. Just a lot of miracles that happen. And so you can see what's going on here. The Galilean ministry is extremely important. It takes up 2 years of Jesus' total 3.5-year ministry. Now, what about John's gospel? Not much there. 15% based on the word count and the number of verses dedicated to Jesus being in Galilee. There's not much there. And mainly, it's about Jesus feeding the 5,000 and the discourse that follows in John chapter 6. So you got a little bit of chapter 5. Mainly, it's chapter 6 that happens to occur during the Galilean ministry. In other words, John hardly talks about the Galilean ministry at all. Matthew, Mark, and Luke place a lot of emphasis. 25% of Luke, and that percentage would be higher if we didn't have that section from chapter 9 to 19 as Jesus sets his face to go to Jerusalem and wanders various places. Here's a map. Let me zoom in on it a little bit. You can see Galilee, that pinkish area. Galilee at this time is its own country. We often think of Palestine. That's the whole country. It used to be the United Kingdom under Saul, David, and Solomon. It became the divided kingdom, and that would include basically the regions of Galilee and Samaria, and then Judea in the south. But by New Testament times, it's its own country, and it is ruled at first by Herod the Great. But then after Herod dies, the kingdom is divided up. And which Herod is it? Herod Archelaus? Who's that? Herod Antipas or Herod Philip? Which one rules Galilee? Antipas. We know a little bit about Philip. But you can see the pinkish areas there in Perea. That's the area that was ruled by Herod Antipas. And his brother has this northern area. There's Caesarea Philippi in the very north of the map. And Jesus will go to Caesarea Philippi, you'll recall. Galilee. This is where he's going to be. This is where we're going to be. For 2 years, Jesus was in Galilee. And this is what happens. As we get going, there is one incident in the Gospel of John. John has his own agenda, but he does mention Jesus healing a child from a distance. For the sake of time, we're not going to be able to spend a while in John 4. But at the very end of John chapter 4, Jesus is still in Cana of Galilee. And while he is there, a man from Capernaum comes and finds him. And that's about a 10-mile distance. And he's desperate for Jesus to heal his son. You should remember this because I've talked about it from the pulpit and from Bible classes just in the 3 years I've been here. It's one of my favorite passages. But this is basically how the Galilean ministry starts. John chapter 4, I guess I'll just read it. Verse 46. So he came again to Cana in Galilee. He had just been in Judea, where he had made the water wine, in chapter 2. And at Capernaum, there was an official whose son was ill, about 10 miles or so away. When the man heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, that makes sense, right? Jesus had been in Judea. He's come up to Galilee through Samaria. He went to him and asked him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Jesus said to him, unless you all see signs and wonders, you will not believe. That doesn't sound like a yes, does it? Sure, I'll come heal your son. That's not what Jesus says. The official said to him, Sir, come down before my child dies. Jesus said to him, Go, your son lives. The man believed the word Jesus spoke to him and went on his way. As he was going down, he's going from Cana to Capernaum. As he was going down, his servants met him and told him his son was recovering. So he asked them the hour when he began to get better, and they said to him, yesterday about the 7th hour. That's early afternoon. About the 7th hour, the fever left him. The father knew that was the hour when Jesus said to him, your son lives. And he himself believed, and all his household. This was now the second sign Jesus did when he had come from Judea to Galilee. Now, chapter 5, between chapter 4 and chapter 5, there's a break, almost a year between chapter 4 and chapter 5, not quite. And so we will come back to the Gospel of John, chapter 5, much later. But right now, let's just think about this. How many times do you see the verb believe used in verses 46 through 54? It's used 3 times. First by Jesus, verse 48. Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. You is plural. Is Jesus talking specifically about this man? You need signs, huh? Unless you all see signs. Well, he's including this man, but he's talking about people in general. They want to see miracles. They won't believe unless they see miracles. And what does this man want Jesus to do? To come heal his son. Now, has Jesus traveled long distances to go heal people? Sure. He's going to go to Lazarus and heal him. He'll raise him from the dead. Has Jesus healed people from a distance in the past? So why didn't Jesus just say, now listen, I'm here, your son's 10, 50 miles away, but when you get home, he's going to be healed. Jesus doesn't say that specifically. He just says, go, your son lives. Is Jesus saying, yes, I'm going to heal your son? Does he say something to that effect that is that specific? I'm going to heal your son. It's implied, and it says that the man believed the word Jesus spoke. The New International Version paraphrases this as, he took Jesus at his word. And we've discussed this, and I don't know if I convinced anyone of what I'm about to say, but I don't think this man had a choice. Jesus had made very plain, made it very plain, he was not going to Capernaum. He was not going to travel that distance. What choice did the man have but to hope that his son will get better? Now, maybe he did. Maybe he said, great, thank you, let's go, all right. But when he is heading home, who meets him? His servants. And they say, hey, everything's great. He's fine. And what's so significant about the hour, the seventh hour? What is so special about that? That's when Jesus said, your son lives. And then it says again about the man, he believed. He believed the word, now he believes. Is there a difference between the first belief regarding the man, the second time it's used, and the third time it's used again? But is there a difference between verse 50, the man believed the word, and then in verse 53, he himself believes? So the first time he believes Jesus' word, the second time he believed. Okay, it doesn't say what he believed or who he believed, but yes, ma'am. Okay, first time by faith, second time by proof. So that would be a distinction there that you're making, that this man really had strong faith here at the start when Jesus said, go, your son lives. Oh, okay, great. I don't think my faith would be that strong. Jesus is saying, go, everything's going to be great. He's like, okay, I sure hope so. Okay, all right, very good. Yes, oh yes. Okay. Is it possible that if the man had not believed, the son would not live? Right. Okay. Okay, Larry. Isn't this powerful? Isn't this a fantastic story?
And then later on, not only he believed, but his whole household believed.
Right.
So what did he do with info once he switched? Told other people, he said, look, this is what happened this time. This. And so he believes his word, but when his servants say he's healed, he's like, well, what time did it happen? Like confirmation, right? But then later, he is telling everybody.
Okay. So just like the last time I talked about this in a Bible class, I've got disagreement with me, and that's fine. Melanie, am I ever wrong? Okay. Yeah, I'm wrong many, many times. You all know that, and I don't mind admitting it. Well, actually, I do mind. And so that's a real possibility that this man has this great faith. Let me ask you this. Let's see if we can agree on this. Is this man's quality of faith different because Jesus refused to go and just said, your son lives? Or would it have been just the same quality of faith if Jesus said, all right, let's go. You got a Ford Bronco here, let's go. Let's drive up there, 10 miles, big deal. Well, it was a big deal. He had to travel that distance. Touch the son, heal the son, yay. Is there a different quality of faith, or is there a different journey for this man's growing faith? I probably muddied all that up, but yes, sir.
Jesus first told him to go, your son lives. He had faith. He wasn't spreading that out to everybody.
Okay.
Hey, Jesus told me my son's going to live.
Very good.
I believe the Lord he didn't see Jesus.
Okay, we haven't seen Jesus, but we believe. to be required of us, because we need to have the faith, the belief in Jesus. The Gospel of John, as you all know, is often dubbed the Gospel of Belief, because the concept of faith or belief is the same word in that language. It's used 100 times in the Gospel. The thesis, we say, of John 20, 30, and 31. The main purpose of the Gospel of John. These things have been written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, and that believing you might have life through his name. And we're just in John 4. You're going to see this word over and over in the Gospel of John. Not that the other Gospels aren't interested in or concerned about belief, but John especially is. This idea of having faith in Jesus, even though you haven't seen him, you can read about these incredible stories that embolden our faith and strengthen us tremendously. That's as Jesus is beginning his Galilean ministry. Well, as we're looking at all the Gospels together, we need to go to Luke chapter 4, which is chronologically next. When Jesus returns to his hometown of his home region of Galilee, he goes to his hometown of Nazareth. And this is the beginning of his ministry. What all has Jesus done thus far? He's gained a few disciples, Peter, Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, or Nathaniel, as probably he's being called in John's gospel. He's got a few disciples. He's performed a few miracles. He's growing in popularity. People know a little bit about him. And he goes to his hometown in Luke chapter 4, and it's a synagogue day. It's Saturday. It's the Sabbath. And apparently, Jesus went to Sabbath worship all the time. And he's here, and they hand him a scroll. And this is part of the worship in a synagogue. Verse 16, he came to Nazareth. Let me back up a couple of verses. This is Luke describing the beginning of Jesus' ministry. And you'll notice what happened just prior in Luke's account. The temptation, and then what was right before that? The baptism. Between Luke 4, 13 and 14, you've got all this early Judean material. Verse 14, Jesus returned in the power of the Spirit to Galilee, and a report about him went throughout all the surrounding country. He taught in their synagogues, being glorified by all. Let's see if Jesus is glorified in Nazareth, the Nazareth synagogue. He came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. As was his custom, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day. And he stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has appointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll and gave it back to the attendant and sat down. And the eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. And he began to say to them, "Today, this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." And all spoke well of him and marveled at the gracious words that were coming from his mouth. And they said, "Is this not Joseph's son? We know him. We've known him since he was a little kid. And he's telling us he's the fulfillment of Isaiah 42, or 61 here. Isaiah 61, 1 and 2. He is the Messiah who's going to give sight to the blind and free those who are oppressed and proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." They knew exactly what Jesus was claiming to be. And instead of going, "Yay, Jesus is the Messiah. Yay, he's from Nazareth. This is great. Just think what this is going to be good for our economy or putting us on the map." What do they end up trying to do to Jesus? Do you remember? Throw him off a cliff. Why are they wanting to kill Jesus? Well, okay, let's back up a second. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I think they're offended that Jesus is claiming to be the Messiah. I think that's what's going on. They're not upset that the Messiah is going to come and what he's going to do. They're upset that Jesus, that they've known all their life. So let me keep reading. Right, absolutely. Verse 23. He said to them, this is Jesus' response to their scoffing. Doubtless you will quote to me this proverb, Physician, heal yourself. What we have heard you did at Capernaum, do here in your hometown as well. And he said, truly I say to you, no prophet is acceptable in his hometown. But in truth, I tell you, there were many widows in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the heavens were shut up 3 years and 6 months, and a great famine came over all the land. And Elijah was sent to none of them, but only to Zarephath in the land of Sidon, the Gentiles, to a woman who was a widow. And there were many lepers in Israel in the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them was cleansed, but only Naaman the Syrian. That is what puts them over the edge. When they heard these things, all in the synagogue were filled with wrath. And they rose up and drove him out of the town, brought him to the brow of the hill on which their town was built, so that they could throw him down the cliff. But passing through their midst, he went away. Can you imagine that scene? We're going to get him, all right, throw him over. Hey, hold on, I'm not Jesus. Where is he? I think that's a miracle, don't you? He's just gone. We're not given any explanation. So, was Jesus insulting them when he said, in Elijah's day, a Gentile widow, was taken care of during the famine, the 3.5 years of no water? In Elisha's day, it wasn't Israelite lepers who were healed. It was Naaman the Syrian. Yes, sir. I got you. And then
this illustrates. I mean, we keep seeing this with the Jews, and I think all of this today is, when Jesus, not long before this, was talking to the Samaritan woman at the well. He said, "You worship what you don't know. You worship what we know." Still got it wrong.
All right. Good point.
They had an idea. No, you can't be Jesus. Jesus is going to look and act like this.
Right. The Messiah is going to do this, and we know you. We've known you since you were in diapers. Did they wear diapers? I guess they did. Yes, ma'am. Foreshadowing. Excellent. That's exactly right. This is foreshadowing what eventually is going to happen to Jesus. There's a lot of drama here. Okay. All right. Excellent. That's very good. Talking about how the Gentiles are healed and others weren't. These are the examples Jesus gives. When the church is finally established, the gospel is preached. There are a lot of Jews who accept, absolutely. But most of them reject the gospel. And that becomes a really disconcerting reality for the Apostle Paul. He says, wait a minute. This is a Jewish Messiah. This is the Messiah here to save the world. Why aren't my fellow countrymen obeying? And so many of the Gentiles are. And Paul, through inspiration, grapples with this, and he writes Romans 9 through 11 in particular, and discusses this, how this could possibly happen, which we're not going to talk about right now. So Jesus has been rejected by Nazareth, his hometown. You might think Jesus would never go back to Nazareth again. But as we piece together his ministry, what we're going to see is Jesus does go back. There's not a violent encounter, but they reject him again. They've heard about his miracles. Instead of giving him a key to the city, they kick him out. Well, as we move on, we're going to stick with Luke's account But you can see here, Matthew and Mark also record this. The call of the four. You can follow along in the book as well that gives some comments on this. Luke 5, 1 through 11. You have Peter, Andrew, James, and John fishing. This is one of my absolute favorite stories. I keep saying that, don't I? Jesus was teaching. The crowd was pressing in on him as he's on the Sea of Galilee, which is a lake, and that's what Luke calls it here in verse 1. Jesus was standing by the Lake of Gennesaret. We know it better as the Sea of Galilee. It's the same exact body of water. It's also sometimes called the Sea of Tiberias. All right, Luke's a little more technical. And he saw two boats by the lake, but the fishermen were gone out of them and were washing their nets. So they've been fishing overnight and taking their fish, I'm sure, to market, and now they're cleaning their nets. Verse 3, getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's, he asked him to put out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people from the boat, because they're kind of pressing in on him. Popular crowd. Verse 4, when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch. Oh. Simon answered, Master, we toiled all night and took nothing. But at your word, I will let down the nets. Well, wait a minute. I mean, if you're a fisherman and you're in the business of catching fish and selling fish, aren't you going to be good at it? But what happened the night before? Instead of having just their normal catch of fish, according to Simon, they caught nothing. I think that's a miracle. I think they were prevented from catching fish. That's my speculation as I'm reading this story. That's not normal. It's kind of like when Dwayne plays dominoes. I mean, normally what he's going to do is win every single hand. But occasionally, he might lose a hand. Well, a hand of dominoes, anyway. Occasionally. I think that's probably fair to say of Peter and his associates. They were good at this. They knew how to fish. You fish all night. You put down the nets. You catch the fish. You cut them up. You take them to the market. I guess you don't even cut them up in that day. You just take them to the market. We toiled all night. Caught nothing. But at your word, I will let down the nets. And we know from John's gospel that Simon, knows Jesus. He's a disciple, an early disciple of Jesus, but he's still fishing. All right, Mark, stop interrupting. Verse 6, when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. They signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both the boats so that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish that they had taken. So also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching men. And when they had brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed him. Are they going to be fishermen now? Nope, they're not fishing for fish anymore. What are they fishing for? Men. They're going to become full-time disciples. Eventually, as Jesus gets into the middle Galilean period, he will actually choose these 4 men as well as 8 others to be his apostles. But that doesn't happen for a while. All right. Right. This is not the first time Peter and Andrew and James and John have seen Jesus. We know that from Luke's account, the early Judean ministry. John chapter 1, even before that even got started. They were disciples of John. And you remember how John pointed out to them, here's the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. And some of these future apostles were some of the ones who went to him. Is that what you were getting at? Yeah. They had. But they had gone back to fishing. They had gone back to their occupations. After this, they don't, until after the crucifixion. And I don't know if you'll remember. I hope you do. But you're going to see another amazing fishing incident. It's recorded in John 21, the last chapter of the Gospel of John, when after Jesus has died, the apostles do go back to fishing. And something very similar to this, an amazing catch of fish is going to happen. And that's going to seal their faith in Jesus as the resurrected Lord. What do you think about this? Peter sees this great quantity of fish caught. Is this normal? The amount of fish. So was it normal to not catch fish the night before? That was normal to not catch fish at night before? I'm speculating here, but I'm assuming if they have a successful business, they're in the business of catching fish, they should have, if everything were normal, they should have caught fish last night. But they caught nothing. That was unusual. Then Jesus comes along and says, hey, I know it's daytime now, and the school of fish, they're out in the water now, but normally they would be there close to the shore, and you put down your nets at night, catch the fish, put down your nets, and you're going to catch fish. And Peter's saying, what? I mean, we fished all night and caught nothing, but at your word, I will let down the nets. They let him down, and what is Peter probably thinking is going to happen? Nothing's going to happen. And I'm sorry if I didn't explain that clearly enough. I believe we're to infer, I should say, that their catch of no fish was embarrassing, was unusual, was going to hurt them financially. And here's Jesus teaching, and then after he's done teaching, he says, hey, Simon, put your nets down. See if you can catch some fish. Oh, I'll tell you what, I mean, everybody's a fisherman. They tell me what to do. I mean, what does he know? We didn't catch anything last night, but okay, all right, whatever. And again, I'm reading into that. What I do know is that Peter is overwhelmed with the abundant catch of fish. And then he responds by coming to Jesus, getting on his knees and saying, depart from me. I'm a sinner. Why did Peter do that? He realized he was in the presence of God, in the presence of greatness, scared, overwhelmed with emotion. Is Simon Peter, is he an emotional guy? Oh, yeah. And we're going to see a lot of that. And Jesus says, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Oh, that's such an important phrase throughout the Bible. From now on, you will be catching men. This is the call of the four: Peter, Andrew, James, and John. They're not apostles officially yet, but they are leaving everything behind to follow Jesus. This is dramatic stuff, isn't it? If somebody's here and they said, these Gospels, they're boring. This isn't boring, is it, at all? This is exciting. There will be some teaching that we're going to have to wade through. There are some difficult parts in the Gospels. There's some parts where I'm going to throw up my hands and say, I don't know what in the world Jesus means when he's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, okay, we won't get into that for a while. There's some challenging aspects to the Gospels, absolutely. But these are exciting, and they're faith building as the story is being told. And Luke's account of the call of Peter, Andrew, James, and John, I think, is the most dramatic of them all. The next incident is teaching in the synagogue and healing. Now notice this. We go from Luke 5, 1 through 11, back to Luke 4, 31 through 37. What's going on there? Are the Gospels strictly chronological? Do they present the material chronologically? No. Matthew is topical. In fact, we're going to spend some time here in Matthew 4. We basically covered Matthew 4, 18 through 22. And then chronologically, we're going to skip chapters 5, 6, and 7, which is the Sermon on the Mount, and go into the middle of chapter 8 chronologically. Because Matthew has a different structure. to his gospel, where he has collections, he has discourses of Jesus, and then he puts together several incidents that are similar to each other. They're not writing like we would write a biography in the 21st century way of writing. They're writing these gospels that are, yes, celebrating the life of someone, but they're also trying to help us understand the significance of Jesus. And they've grouped some things together. Mark's gospel seems to be generally chronological. And so you've got Mark 1, 16 through 20, the call of the four, Mark 1, 21 through 26, and then you'll see Mark 1, 29 through 34 as we keep going. So let's go back to Luke 4, 31 through 37. We're not going to read this, but what you see is Jesus cast out a demon. And the demon even addresses Jesus as Jesus of Nazareth, the Holy One of God. Verse 34. Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent, come out of him." And he cast out the demon. Verse 36. And they were all amazed and said to one another, "What is this word? For with authority and power he commands the unclean spirits, and they come out." And reports about him went out into every place in the surrounding region. This is in Capernaum. This is in Capernaum, a city of Galilee, verse 31. Jesus is doing this on purpose. Capernaum is going to be part of a long series of trade routes. Word about Jesus is going to spread everywhere. I'm going to emphasize that a lot, because Jesus knows exactly what he's doing. He's performing these miracles. When the apostles are ready to start preaching after Jesus ascends to heaven in the book of Acts, the seeds have already been planted. People know who Jesus is or was on the earth, and that these are his followers. Reports about him went out every place in the surrounding region. Verse 36, they were all amazed. That's why these books we're using are called Amazed by Jesus. All four Gospels emphasize the overwhelming response people had. In fact, of these incidents that we're looking at, were people who interacted with Jesus, were they the same after he interacted with them? In the case of the man in John 4, 46 through 54, how was he, by his encounter with Jesus, how did he change? He went from, he believes in Jesus. He truly believes in Jesus. Ma'am? Right, his household. That man was changed, I would venture to say. What about at Nazareth? Are the people there going to respond differently with Jesus now? It's negative, but yeah, they have a volatile response is what I'm trying to get at. There's a gut-wrenching response. The call of the four. Peter, does he make a gut-wrenching response to Jesus? "Depart from me, I am a sinful man." And now here in the synagogue, you've got people amazed. Wow, this guy's incredible. Yes, ma'am. Okay. I think so too. Okay. Maybe slow changing for some, but for other, okay.
John the Baptist's job description was to prepare the way. Jesus also uses this prepare the way in Capernaum.
I believe so.
He set the table for him and got a conversation going, so when he shows up.
All right. So as we close, we're going to have to end here. Got another minute, and that's it. Your interaction with Jesus, has it changed you? Is it continually changing you? As we're looking at the Gospels, we're actually studying the Gospels. We're seeing firsthand accounts of Jesus. I hope it changes us too. I hope we grow in our faith, in our commitment, in our dedication, and our awe of Jesus. I stand amazed in the presence of Jesus the Nazarene. Tonight, Larry's going to be talking to us about being led by the Spirit. This is actually a lesson topic that I chickened out of. I said, no, we're not going to do that one. Talk about the Holy Spirit. And Larry said, we need to do that. So tonight, we're going to talk about Jesus being led by the Spirit and how that applies to us this evening. Thank you for studying with me.